today's hearing on examining the history and significance of, quote, lift every voice and sing, unquote. Before we continue, we have established email address previously shared distribution to be used through that line. Today's hearing members to mute their microphones so they're not speaking. Anytime you seek recognition, and I'll now recognize myself for the opening statement. Lift Every Voice and Sing is an inspiring and moving hymn, one that increasingly has gained a central important place in American culture. As the nation begins its commemoration of Black History Month, it's worth the subcommittee's time to consider the history and continuing cultural importance of this iconic song, its origins in the historical context of African Americans, struggles against the racism and inequality that undergirded slavery. It was later repeated, forced by Jim Crow laws and racist social norms, as well as its universally human nature of hope and perseverance in the face of extreme adversity. Very inspiring song. We'll also learn about H.R. 301, a bill that would designate this particular song or hymn, Lift Every Voice, as the national hymn. The proposal would not displace the Star Spangled Banner as the national anthem, but would rather add Lift Every Voice to an official repertoire of national songs. I know in Tennessee we have 5 or 6 different songs. Indeed, today we find ourselves going through the latest round of fierce and ongoing national debate about what it means to be, quote, American, unquote. New counts as part of our national story. This meta debate overlays many of the policy-specific debates that this committee has engaged in recent years on issues ranging from voting rights to policing reform to hate crimes. Perhaps understandably, this debate can become very heated and take on some rough edges. It can even threaten to pull our nation apart. This is all the more reason why it's critical for us to embrace inclusive national symbols and patriotic customs and make people understand what they are about. It's not just a song for a particular group of Americans. It's a song that can be and should be for every American. We have national symbols and customs. History, creativity, and ingenuity of the American people is much broader and deeper than what these symbols and customs embody. Adding Lift Every Voice and Sing to our nation's canon of official music could be just the thing that serves as a form of healing, brings this country together. And that's what Majority Whip Clyburn said, its purpose is to bring this country together. Perhaps our witnesses will be able to successfully make that case today. I thank Representative Clyburn and all of our other witnesses being here today. I very much look forward to their testimony. And now I'd like to recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Johnson, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for being here this morning. This is a hearing, as you noted, that's focused on the song Lift Every Voice and Sing in the United States to make it a national hymn. As one scholar wrote, the song is, quote, an omnipresent part of African-American worship traditions and an enduring refrain, unquote. The song's first public performance was during the celebration of Abraham Lincoln's birthday in 1900, and it's been since sung by many notable people on many notable occasions over the last 120 years. The song honors the fact that each of us is made in God's image, and every single person has an estimable dignity and value that's not related in any way to the color of our skin or where we live or what we do for a living. All of us are created equally in God's image. That's part of the DNA of America. That's what we believe. And racism and racial violence violate the most fundamental principles of our great nation and the will of our Creator, and we all acknowledge it. America is not perfect, but it's an exceptional country, and we're always growing, we're always learning, we're always striving toward a more perfect union. And that's our charge, and that's our calling. And so at this hearing, we'll consider and explore our history, we'll learn from it, and it'll show us in the end, I think, how exceptional our country truly is. In recent years, we've seen the lowest unemployment rate for African Americans in history, thankfully. We've seen historic criminal justice reform. We've seen expanded educational opportunities for all children in the country, and there's much more work to do, as we all know. We have to unite and empower all communities in America, and I love what Mr. Clyburn said. We have to bring this country together. So any measure that will help do that, we think is worthy of our time and discussion. So I thank the witnesses for being here. Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for your statement. spirit contained therein. Mr. Nadler, you're now recognized for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The song "Lift Every Voice and Sing" has been a beacon of hope to generations of Americans. Its message, while rooted in and shaped by the experience of African Americans and their struggles against racial oppression, is universal, offering hope and faith in the future of the face of darkness. I appreciate the opportunity today to examine the origins and the historical context in which "Lift Every Voice and Sing" was written, as well as its continuing importance to American culture and values. I'm also pleased that we'll be able to hear from our colleague, the distinguished House Majority Whip, Congressman James Clyburn, about his legislation, H.R. 301, which would designate "Lift Every Voice and Sing" as our country's national hymn. The song, which was first sung by school children in 1900 to commemorate Abraham Lincoln's birthday, has persisted in influence over the past 120 years. The brothers James Weldon Johnson and J. Rosamond Johnson wrote "Lift Every Voice and Sing" at the turn of the 20th century. This was a period in which the promises of racial equality made by the nation to African Americans during Reconstruction were betrayed. Previous advances toward equality were being dismantled. Segregation had been codified through Plessy versus Ferguson, and the Jim Crow reign of terror was gaining its foothold. All the while, the Ku Klux Klan wreaked havoc against African Americans, initiating a campaign of racist terror, violence, and murder. Through all this, African Americans continued to risk their lives for their own visions of what freedom could be in the aftermath of slavery. Even in the face of horrific violence, they never ceased in their struggle for freedom. "Lift Every Voice and Sing" is a song about transcending those difficulties and maintaining hope for the future. To sing this song is not only to acknowledge the suffering of the past, but also to look ahead to a brighter future. It is a reminder that while the journey ahead may be arduous, obstacles are surmountable if we join together in the fight for equality. Although "Lift Every Voice and Sing" is a song that recognizes the history and progress of African Americans, its influence and appeal extends beyond the boundaries of race. From its inception to today, "Lift Every Voice and Sing" has and continues to unify individuals of all cultures. It is a song of uplift and solidarity. It speaks to the universal human condition of struggle and triumph, and it connects us to a common purpose: equality for all. The song's sermonic quality, coupled with its powerful lyrics of hope and perseverance, has resonated at key gatherings, such as presidential inaugurations of both political parties and at civil rights demonstrations. It was endorsed by Booker T. Washington in 1905 and later adopted by the NAACP, becoming a rallying cry during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. "Lift Every Voice and Sing" is a reminder of how far we have progressed as a country, while simultaneously calling upon us to continue our work towards a better future. The song represents patriotism in the best possible sense. It commands us to be dedicated to our nation and to honor the sacrifices of the generations that came before us by continuing to work toward the full promise of freedom for all Americans. I want to thank Congressman Clyburn for bringing forth this bill, and I also welcome all our witnesses. I look forward to their testimony, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Nadler. I don't know if Mr. Jordan's present or not. I don't see him on my screen. Mr. Jordan, are you want to be recognized for your opening statement? If Mr. Jordan's not with us, we'll go right into the opening remarks that I'll make. Thank you. We welcome our witnesses on both panels. Thank them for participating in today's hearing. Warn you that we have votes around 9:30 or so and might have to break up during your testimony and come back. I will now introduce each of the witnesses, and after each introduction, recognize that witness for his or her oral testimony. Please note each of your written statements will be entered in the record. If you say anything that is false, you could be subject to penalties under Section 1001 of Title 18 of the U.S. Code. There's a 5-minute mark, which is for you to limit your remarks to 5 minutes. It's on the timers on the screen that has all of the different folks on it. But I don't know what you call that, but it's a screen where everybody's picture comes up, the view, I guess. Apologies to Mrs. Goldberg. Sole witness on the first panel is the distinguished House Majority Whip, Honorable James E. Clyburn. Congressman Clyburn represents the 6th Congressional District of South Carolina, having served in Congress since 1993. In 2007, he was first elected majority whip, the third ranking position in the House, and served in that position from 7 to 11. Once again elected majority whip when we came in the majority in 2019 and has served in that position since. During the times we were in the minority, 2011 to 2019, he was the assistant House Democratic leader. Proudly served as chair and vice chair of the House Democratic Caucus and as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. He's also a recipient of the Lift I Am a Man Award. Among his many accomplishments is his introduction of HR 301, the bill that would designate "I'll Lift Every Voice and Sing" as the national hymn. Whip Clyburn, I welcome you to today's hearing and I recognize you for your testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of you who have joined in here today, most especially our witnesses this day who will be giving testimony. I particularly want to welcome my longtime friend, Leon Russell. Leon and I enjoyed almost 3 decades of a professional relationship before I came to Congress, and both of us are still hanging in here. He is the chair of the National Board of the NAACP, and I welcome him and the others here today. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the ranking member, Mr. Johnson, for calling this hearing. And I particularly want to associate myself with the comments made by ranking member Johnson. They were very prolific, and I really appreciate them so much. So I'm going to be skipping through some of what I had to say because he said it all for me. Chairman NADLER, thank you so much as well. My classmate, you have risen to elevated heights, and I enjoy being here with you today. So recently, I have been reflecting on this whole notion of what Benjamin Franklin reported to have said when he was asked what he and the founding fathers had wrought. He's reported to have replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." Later on, Franklin joined with John Adams and Thomas Jefferson to propose that the Latin phrase "e pluribus unum," out of many one, be placed on our currency as the nation's motto. Our nation continues to struggle with the issues of race and equity. The threads of our fragile democracy are fraying, and as the people's representatives, it is incumbent upon us to make every effort to heed Franklin's words of concern and his and Adams and Jefferson's expression of unity. It is our responsibility to demonstrate, not only with our words, but by our actions, that we can and will keep this republic intact and its people unified. That is why I introduced HR 301 to designate the iconic hymn, "Lift Every Voice and Sing," the national hymn of the United States of America. Enshrining "Lift Every Voice and Sing" as our national hymn will be one such substantive step forward. "Lift Every Voice and Sing" was written by James Weldon Johnson as a poem and set to music by his brother, John Rosamond Johnson. The hymn was first performed, as you heard, on February 12, 1900 by a choir of 500 school children from the segregated Stanton School in Jacksonville, Florida. In 1905, Booker T. Washington recognized the hymn, and it became popular throughout the Black community across the United States. In 1919, the NAACP designated "Lift Every Voice and Sing" as its official song, and it was dubbed the Black National Anthem. I and scores of people with whom I have interacted have never been comfortable with that designation. We believe that out of many backgrounds and experiences, there should be but one national anthem. And we believe "Lift Every Voice and Sing" is a hymn that is so cherished by so many people of all faiths, creeds, backgrounds, and experiences that designating it as our national hymn would be very fitting and proper. Its wide appeal is no accident. It is currently produced and distributed by approximately 40 religious publishing houses throughout the United States. It is sung by all faiths and persuasions. Recent renditions have proven just how wide its appeal is, from Alicia Keys' performance at the Super Bowl to Beyonce's rendition in 2018 Coachella. The lyrics of Lift Every Voice and Sing are applicable to the experience of nearly every ethnic background in America. They also acknowledge the challenges of our future. Just consider the words. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on to victory is won. I thank the committee for holding this hearing and look forward to hearing from today's witnesses. I am hopeful that this hearing and this legislation will help us more fully realize our nation's motto as we continue our pursuit of a more perfect union. And I thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Clyburn, as always, well delivered. And now the panel, our second panel with the witnesses will come forward and we will recognize them. Our first is Leon Russell. Mr. Russell is the chairman of the National Board of Directors of the NAACP. The position is held since 2017 after having served in various other board roles on the board. He had previously served as president of the NAACP's Florida State Conference of Branches and was for 35 years the director of human rights for the Pinellas County, Florida Human Rights Commission. Mr. Russell, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Cohen, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the House Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties. Founded on February 12th, 1909, the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, is our nation's oldest, largest, and most widely recognized grassroots civil rights organization. Our membership consists of hundreds of thousands of card-carrying individuals representing diverse racial, ethnic, social, and economic backgrounds, participating in more than 2,200 units throughout the nation. We have active units on college and university campuses, and even units in prison, behind prison walls. These units are supported by millions of digital followers and military members serving in units throughout the world. I am Leon Russell, chairman of the 64-member National Board of Directors of the NAACP, the governing body of our national organization. In this capacity, I am responsible for overseeing the development of the association's policies and strategy implementation and monitoring. I was delighted to receive your invitation to testify with respect to HR 301, Lift Every Voice and Sing. So allow me to first thank my longtime friend who keeps changing the number of years we've known each other, James Clyburn, for introducing the bill, and let me at the outset indicate that the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People fully supports adoption of Lift Every Voice as a national hymn. I will address the history and significance of the song and why we at the NAACP believe it should be designated as the national hymn. Let me recognize that we do not call for this great hymn to supplant or replace the national anthem. The composers never intended for that to happen. It's clear that they wrote a song that spoke reverently to the lived experience of a people who were here from the beginning of this great experiment in democracy, and that they intended through the words and its triumphal music to ensure that our nation be ever mindful of that people's role in the development of our democracy. The fact that this song has been sung continuously for more than 122 years since it was first performed in venues large and small, by children in school, by civil rights activists in mass meetings in the midst of the civil rights struggle, by college choirs, by the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, and even lately by crowds at National Football League stadiums, is a testament to the spiritual impact and meaning for millions of Americans. The song was written by James Weldon Johnson and set to music by his brother John Rosamond Johnson from Jacksonville, Florida. The inspiration for the song was a request that James Weldon Johnson provide a poem to be included in a community celebration of the birthday of the great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln, in February of 1900. It is important to note that James Weldon Johnson was principal of Stanton School in Jacksonville. The school was the primary school serving the Black community of Jacksonville when Johnson became the principal. However, it added high school classes under his leadership. Johnson's life experience was reflective of the lived experience of Black folks that is so eloquently described in the words of the song. Facing the threats posed by racism in his hometown, Johnson and his brother would move north to New York City, where he would become a historically recognized civil rights activist, diplomat, author, politician, journalist, poet, educator, lawyer, songwriter, and one of the prime movers of the Harlem Renaissance. He was indeed the embodiment of many early African-American trailblazers. Most people recognize Johnson as the author of Lift Every Voice and Sing. However, few are aware of his hard work and dedication to the cause of civil rights and social justice advocacy, exemplified by his fight against racism and his fight for equality during the 10 years that he served as the executive secretary of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I need to note here that James Weldon Johnson succeeded John Shilladay, a white man who had served in the position until he was beaten nearly to death by a white mob in Texas, where he had gone to investigate a lynching in 1919. Johnson had been hired as field secretary by the association in 1916. When Shilladay resigned, Johnson became the first Negro to hold the senior staff position at the association in 1920. For context, I remind you that the association was founded in 1909. Johnson's personal story is emblematic of much of the spiritual meaning that I recognize in the song. I commend you to further study. Asked to speak at the 1900 Abraham Lincoln birthday celebration, Johnson wrote a poem for the occasion. While reflecting on what he had written, he decided to change the poem to a song. So he asked his brother, music professor John Rosamond Johnson, to write the music. There is much speculation about what the Johnsons intended Lift Every Voice and Sing to be. What is clear is that the song is written as part of that celebration, has become synonymous with, if not the very theme for, the modern civil rights movement. Although Lift Every Voice and Sing was written to be sung as part of the program in tribute to Lincoln, Lincoln's name never appears in the song. What is clear is that the invitation to participate in the Lincoln Day celebration inspired the creation of the song. Also clear is the fact that children who sang the song were so inspired that they carried it with them the rest of their lives. The celebration included the students from all across the city, 500 voices. After that, the song has been sung in public meetings in Florida and all across the country. It would not be forgotten, but I cannot find any indication that it was promoted. The song became the national NAACP hymn, let's be clear, during Johnson's tenure as executive secretary. He served from 1920 to 1930. The board adopted the song in 1923 as the NAACP hymn. Let me also say,
Mr. Russell, let me ask you, you can kind of conclude your remarks. We've gone a goodly while. We've got votes.
okay, well, just let me make it clear that the NAACP fully endorses Lift Every Voice and Sing as a national hymn because we feel it brings this country together. It speaks to oppression of any people. And let me add that we strongly urge you to adopt this song. And Mr. Cohen, I would say that Maxine Smith would have loved your rendition, even though Mr. Clyburn did not. Thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. Maxine Smith was my friend, and her picture's on my wall outside, along with Ben Hooks and Julian Bond and others. And she was a wonderful woman and a treasure of the NAACP, national treasure for many, many, many years. Thank you for remembering her during this hearing. Our next witness is Dr. Dwandalyn Reese. Dr. Reese is Associate Director of Curatorial Affairs at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. She brings more than 30 years of knowledge and experience in the field of museum works and more than 10 years as curator of music and performing arts in the National Museum of African American History. That role, she built a collection of 4,000 objects, curated the museum's inaugural permanent exhibition, Musical Crossroads, which she received the Secretary's Research Prize in 2017, curated the museum's grand opening music festival, Freedom Sounds, served as executive committee chair. The Pan-Institutional Group of Smithsonian Music and co-curated the Smithsonian Year of Music Initiative in 2019. Received her PhD from NYU, master's from the University of Michigan, and an undergraduate degree from Scripps College. Dr. Reese, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Jordan, Chairman Cohen, and Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the committee. I want to thank you today for giving me the opportunity to testify on HR 301. As was introduced, my name is Dwandalyn Reese, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture's Associate Director for Curatorial Affairs. In Lift Every Voice and Sing, the Johnson brothers captured the full story of the African American experience, acknowledging the emotional and physical toll of enslavement and the strength and faith it took to survive it and persevere. The poignant lyrics and majestic accompaniment galvanized the Black community and quickly began to make its way through communities across the country. By 1919, the NAACP had designated Lift Every Voice and Sing as its official song. It wasn't long before you could find copies of the hymn inserted or pasted into the hymnals of Black churches across the country. Lift Every Voice and Sing is the perfect fusion of poetry and music. The lyrics trace the experience of Black people through slavery and freedom, using visual metaphors that capture the emotion and significance of each line. J. Rosamond Johnson's arrangement amplifies these lyrics. The shift from major to minor keys in each verse mirrors the highs and lows of that experience that are embodied merely through the act of singing. And the plodding, speech-like setting of the first 3 words in each refrain provides a direct connection to the emotional gravity of the text. Johnson was steadfast in describing Lift Every Voice and Sing as a hymn. Hymns are used in a variety of religious traditions and are written to foster a shared experience as voices come together in song. The text can focus solely on religious themes, or focus on universal themes that speak to the moral, spiritual, and emotional concerns that are part of the human condition. Lift Every Voice and Sing is a combination of both. The language is largely universal, but there are also words and phrases that invoke the presence of God and a higher power. Johnson took great pride in the way his hymns served the Black community. He was also inspired in the way people across the world identified with its core message and embraced it as their own. Since its publication, Lift Every Voice and Sing has been sung at community meetings, public events, conventions, conferences, schools, official gatherings, and ceremonial occasions. The hymn has served this nation much in the same way Julia Ward Howe's Battle Hymn of the Republic did in the Civil War. Lift Every Voice and Sing has been in the hymnals of Black denominations for more than a century. However, it wasn't until the 1980s when the song started to show up in the hymnals of larger mainline denominations. The Episcopal Church was one of the first to respond when it included the hymn in the publication of its standard 1982 hymnal. Today, the count is 44 hymnals where Lift Every Voice and Sing appear. James Weldon Johnson's poem honored Lincoln's legacy by reflecting on the symbolic meaning of his presidency and what it meant for African Americans and the nation overall. Lift Every Voice and Sing legacy is a source of pride and inspiration, and a meditation on the transformative power that resilience, hope, and a collective sense of purpose have in the pursuit of liberty for all. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to testify before you today about the historical importance of Lift Every Voice and Sing, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reese. And since this is Black History Month, I should clarify an error. Ms. Smith was not the national treasurer. That was Jessie Turner, who was part of her team along with Russell Sugarman. She was the executive director of the local NAACP in Memphis for like 40 years. Our next witness is Dr. Naomi Andre. Dr. Andre is professor of women's studies, Department of African American and African Studies, and the Residential College Arts and Ideas and Humanities program at the University of Michigan. Her research focuses on opera and issues surrounding race, voice, and race, and gender. Her publications include topics on Italian opera, Schoenberg, women composers, and teaching opera in prisons. She recently published Black Opera, History, Power, and Engagement. In 2019, she was named the inaugural scholar in residence at the Seattle Opera. She has a PhD and an MA from Harvard and a BA from Barnard College. Professor Andre, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Cohen, Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee. I am happy and very honored to have my voice included in this hearing, supporting Lift Every Voice and Sing to become a national hymn. My entrance in the discussion gets to the core of what I want to emphasize, the sense of belonging. While belonging might be a birthright of citizenship, it is not always experienced in the happenings of daily life. Belonging is not proven by statistics or enforced through surveys and in-person and online workshops. Belonging should not be an aspiration. Instead, it is a feeling we have when we are seen as being fully human. As a musicologist, I want to spend a moment unpacking the musical term, hymn. Going back to the ancient Greeks with discussions by Pindar, Bacchylides, and in Homeric poems, the Grove Music Dictionary, and this is the gold standard for scholarly music reference, the Grove Music Dictionary describes the hymn and its ability, quote, to weave or to combine words artfully, end quote. The Oxford English Dictionary traces its history from Latin, Greek, and Hebrew words, with hymn being, quote, a metrical composition adapted to be sung in a religious service, sometimes distinguished from psalm or anthem as not being part of the text of the Bible, end quote. In the second listing from the OED, there's a broadening away from the religious connotations, with the hymn being, quote, an ode or song of praise in honor of a deity, a country, etc., end quote. I like this term hymn because it has a long continued history up to the present. In addition to the Jewish, Greek, and Roman uses, there are also medieval Christian and Byzantine versions of the hymn as a poetic object. The hymn was a genre that was later adopted by Protestant faiths to support congregational singing and worship. This is important for the unity it can create and for belonging in a community. In the mid-20th century, the hymn has a special use in civil rights movement and linked the themes of devotion, praise, liberty, and protest all together. Hence, since antiquity and up to the present, as a genre, the hymn has spiritual, religious, political, and social capacities that center it in articulations of culture and community. Though Lift Every Voice and Sing was written by a Black compositional team, James Weldon Johnson and his brother John Rosamond Johnson, there is nothing in the three stanzas of the text that exclusively refers to African Americans. The Black experience is embodied while also referencing the triumph, struggles, and strength that all humans encounter. The text refers to the hard work, aspiration, motivation, and moving towards victory. National songs that have connections to a country's heterogeneous populations present the opportunity to elevate voices from its larger community. When South Africa dismantled apartheid and created a new national anthem, the committee was chaired by its most prominent Black South African composer, Mzilikazi Khumalo. The national anthem of South Africa, adopted in 1997, brings together the 5 most widely spoken of South Africa's 11 official languages: Xhosa, Zulu, Sesotho, Afrikaans, and English. Sections of the anthem contain previous national anthems from South Africa's white and Black populations. The intended result was for the national music, their national anthem, to voice the sound through language and music of its diverse communities. A nation has the potential to create its own sonic landscapes. Such power comes from the connectedness its people feel. How are their experiences embraced in emblems of national representation? Sound can generate belonging. As a national hymn, Lift Every Voice and Sing will engage familiar audiences while embracing new communities. Thank you for allowing me to testify on today's important topic. I will be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Professor Andre. We've had the bell go off, but I think we can have our witnesses for a few more minutes, and then we'll see what we can do. Our next witness is Mr. Clarence Henderson, President of the Frederick Douglass Foundation of the state of North Carolina, participant in the sit-ins, Woolworth lunch counters in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1960. Served on the advisory board of Black Voices for Trump. You're now recognized for 5 minutes, Mr. Henderson.
Good morning to all the members of the subcommittee. Lift Every Voice and Sing will forever have a powerful place in American history and will be a continual reminder that equality and justice must be defended. It was written in the time of Jim Crow, which was a dark time in our history, of which I lived in and had the opportunity to put Jim Crow on trial when I participated in the 1960 Woolworth sit-in in Greensboro, North Carolina. The song was first performed in public to celebrate the birthday of President Abraham Lincoln, which reminds me of the resiliency that we exhibited when we came up out of slavery and continued until we eventually broke the back of Jim Crow. One of my concerns is that this great inspirational song not be used out of context as a racial divide to take us back to times that were and no longer are. That those who may vote against this measure are not viewed as racist or having a difference of opinion. History shows us the unifying progress that America has made since then. One of the examples of progress are the elections of Black Americans in some of the highest political positions in the land, such as electing President Obama as first Black president, appointing Justice Thomas to the Supreme Court, the election of North Carolina's first Black Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson, and Virginia's first Black female Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears, just to name a few. This did not happen within a vacuum with just a Black vote. The voting in these officials is an example of forming a more perfect union. As a matter of fact, the preamble of the Constitution is an introduction to the reasoning for forming a new nation, and it begins with we the people. Before that, we had the Declaration of Independence, in which the second sentence shows what American exceptionalism looks like. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they have been endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it ends with the reason for forming our government. That's to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. For those of you who have been elected, let us lean toward practical and essential approaches for addressing issues that are facing the country as a whole. According to the Pew Center Research Center, as of April 15, 2021, America's top 10 views facing the nation indicated as a very big problem are, number one, the affordability of healthcare with 56%. Number two, the federal budget deficit of 49%. Number three, violent crime, 48%. Number four, illegal immigration, same at 48%. Gun violence at 48%. The coronavirus outbreak, 47%. Racism, 45%. Economic equality, 43%. Unemployment, 41%. Climate change, 39%. As we see, 45% of Americans view is racism as the very important issue that needs to be addressed. However, as I stated earlier, my concern is that we do not use Lift Every Voice and Sing as a symbolic gesture to further divide. It is my hope that we understand the progress of the American experience is never complete, but continues to grow with concentrated efforts to become a unified country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson, and thank you for your bravery to participating in the Woolworth sit-in. That was set the movement in strong action. I think we should take our break. There's 6 minutes remaining in the vote. Lots of people haven't voted. I'd ask all the members of the committee to vote immediately and return immediately. I'm going to move, and by the time I get back, I hope everybody will be back with me. So at this point, we are going to recess for approximately 8 minutes and return for Dr. Redmond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the leadership, membership, and the staff who invited me here today and made this conversation possible. Hello, and thank you to my colleagues who are also witnesses in this event today. It is not an exaggeration to say that the influence and impact of Lift Every Voice and Sing is immeasurable. My comments today will only scratch the surface of its importance, but will, I hope, nonetheless assist in deliberations. As we know, it was written at the turn of the century by the brothers Johnson and was carried from its original Jacksonville community out into the rest of the US segregated South via Black school teachers, faith workers, and families for decades before it was adopted as the hymn of the NAACP. It was and remains a standard performance within that organization, one that comes with its own official and unofficial rules, including standing during its performance. The song served as an introduction to the NAACP for many who knew the song but had little or no knowledge of the organization in the 1920s and 30s, when it began major organizing campaigns in the South. The song was a greeting, a familiar piece of Southern Black history, and a welcome into the future of that interracial organization. The Johnsons received requests to reprint and perform Lift Every Voice and Sing from all over the country and the world in the early decades of the 20th century. Religious organizations and camps, hymnal projects, missions in Africa, intercultural propaganda in Japan, people wanted this song. They cared for it, and they wrote to its authors to inquire about how exactly it should be sung. Crescendo here, diminuendo here, in order to honor all that it signaled. Lift Every Voice and Sing called to historical and present experiences of racism and other forms of dispossession, while also highlighting the greatest principles of democratic possibility, which the elder Johnson believed in wholeheartedly. As a Party of Lincoln Republican and appointed consul abroad, James Weldon understood that the Black experience of violence in the US was vile, but not insurmountable, distinct but unexceptional globally. His investment in the promises of democracy meant that Lift Every Voice and Sing was not an end, but a beginning, an opening into the community from which our best futures are made. When people gather to sing, things begin to change, from the pressure in the air to the ways in which people live. As I wrote in my first book, Anthem, music is a method that allows us to do and imagine things that may otherwise be unimaginable or seem impossible. Lift Every Voice and Sing is a perfect example of this process. It is a song with vision that was readily accessible to and adopted by a wide variety of communities. Unlike the Star-Spangled Banner, Lift Every Voice and Sing is not coerced. It was and is chosen for performance by people invested in and inspired by its message. Although institutionalized by the NAACP, the song retained its value to people beyond the organization, who took it up in protest and in praise then as well as now. Historically Black colleges and universities who are facing increasing assault, jazz musicians in protest against police violence in New York City, a joint recital in 2021 by gospel choirs at Arizona State University and York University in Ontario, Canada, as well as the song's appearance on stages for the NFL and popular music festival Coachella, document that the song is not a relic, but a resource that is tapped regularly because it means something that is reinvented with every performance. Lift Every Voice and Sing is significant not because of its exceptional author or even its dynamic history with the NAACP, but because it is useful to people. Regularly adopted for the concert stage as well as enactments of dissent, it is an actively sought after song with recognizable ambitions and consequences. The investment in the song is so high that while Johnson consistently described the song as a hymn, it has been known for generations as the Black national anthem. This designation is a testament to its power and vision and a strong suggestion that its time of usefulness is far from over. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we can't hear you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Our next witness is Lloyd Washington. Mr. Washington is president of the Dirkville Historical Society Museum in Jacksonville, Florida. He's held that position since 2011, active member of the Historical Society there, and he's championed the creation of Lift Every Voice and Sing on the birth site of James Weldon Johnson and John Rosamond Johnson, the brothers who wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing. Mr. Washington, you're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Good morning to the chair and members of the committee. The song Lift Every Voice and Sing has been performed by many popular singers such as Marian Anderson, the most celebrated singer of her era. Is still being performed today by singers such as Beyonce and Alicia Keys. Here in Jacksonville, Reverend James Henry and the Somerville Baptist Church sing it every second Sunday. During the month of February, this song will be performed by the Children's Choir. And the Villa School of the Art performed the song during its European tour. It continues to be performed in schools, faith communities, and civic gatherings in Jacksonville. The hymn has brought hope, solidarity in Jacksonville. As the importance of the song across different races, creed, and cultures, whether at a citywide celebration of Dr. King or a prayer vigil in the town square. The very act of singing, Lift Every Voice and Sing, embodies the hope, justice, and freedom that is the core of our democratic system. I support making this hymn our national anthem. Any question? Yeah, I'm sorry, national hymn. Let me correct that.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. I appreciate your testimony and I appreciate your clarifying national hymn. Our next witness, and our last witness before we break, is Miss Melanie Edwards. Ms. Edwards has worked in the Office of Government, works in the Office of Government and Community Affairs at Columbia, granddaughter of the distinguished Johnsons, J. Rosamond Johnson, and grandniece of James Weldon Johnson, and is their last known surviving family member. She's currently working to have an autobiography written by her grandfather published. In addition, she's worked in education for 40 years, including the Modern School, Fordham, Schoenberg Library, and the East Harlem Council for Community Improvement. Ms. Edwards, you were recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, committee members. My name is Melanie Edwards. The song that you are considering today for national hymn status was composed by my grandfather, J. Rosamond Johnson, not John Johnson, not John Rosamond, simply J. Rosamond Johnson. Thank you. The lyrics were written by his brother, James Weldon Johnson. When people have asked before this occasion, how do I feel about the song? I've answered honestly, much to their disappointment and dismay. This melody is one of many, some 200, according to ASCAP, American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, that my grandfather created, while the lyrics that began life as a poem was just one of many others that my granduncle wrote. This song is a small part of both men's artistic output, so I have no sense of it being an unusually remarkable achievement. I am, however, always humbled and impressed by the staying power it has had. Few things over 100 years old are referenced for their relevance or timeliness. This quality is what I hope you, making your decision today, keep in mind. Lift Every Voice and Sing still speaks to many people in this time and this place, while it speaks also to people of many races, faiths, and conditions around the world. Like the Black men who created it, Lift Every Voice and Sing comments eloquently and accurately about history, hope, vision, and perseverance. In 1913, my grandfather was working in London when he married my grandmother, Nora, and they conceived my mother, Mildred. Although Rosamond experienced the wrenching social changes of the post-Reconstruction and burgeoning Jim Crow era, he chose to return to his home, his country, so that his daughter would be born in America in Jacksonville. His brother also had opportunities to see other countries, but he too chose to stand by his native land, even when it didn't always stand by him. So I ask for your support of Bill H.R. 301, not for me. I get no benefit personally or financially. The song is in public domain. I do appeal, however, to your sense of history and legacy. I have pride in the legacy that is Lift Every Voice and Sing. By your designating it the national hymn, which is what James Weldon himself called it, you add another piece to America's already great cultural legacy and heft. Greatness is not just defined by strength or use of force. Great nations, like great people, are additionally magnanimous, self-aware, and self-correcting. By approving this bill, your legacy will be acknowledging the dark and gloomy past of American history, yet assuring others that grace and continued effort are rewarded by change, social, economic, and spiritual. This song, penned by my forebearers to America, for America, I invite you to claim it as your legacy and your gift from America to the world. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. I appreciate your testimony and everybody else's testimony. I think, Mr. Clyburn, if you can help me with this, I'm guessing 20 minutes for the second vote, 20 minutes between the second and 20 between the second and third, 20 between the third and fourth. People get their votes done before the first one. I guess we should adjourn for, say, 30 minutes should get us back. Everybody gets up there and votes immediately on the last one. We could probably get back in 30 minutes. So with that, we're going to take a recess unless Mr. Clyburn thinks we should make it a little longer. You okay with 30 minutes?
Yeah, there'll still be votes left if we did that. I don't know how many questions you might add, but I think you've got time for about 12 minutes of questions. If you'd like to take it now, and I'll make sure you get the vote.
Thank you. We'll go ahead with questions. I think it might be tight, but we'll go ahead and start.
Yeah, because I don't want to keep the witnesses here too long.
All right. I'm normally recognize myself, but I'm going to yield to other members because of the time, and I'll recognize Mr. Nadler first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hey,
Dr. Andre, can you discuss how the feelings of community and connectivity that this song engenders applies for all people that listen to it, not just African Americans?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your question. I think that the issue of community is born in a history of where the hymn, what it means, and it seems to just match so nicely on here. And it's wonderful to have it clarified that this was called a hymn from the beginning, although, and to get this history correct, because so many times people want to call it an anthem, and yet I really appreciate what this what this House resolution is doing to say that it's a hymn. I think the hymn has enough sort of a history that makes it do many things, but basically a song of praise that goes back to antiquity, that includes areas around the world, that has a very strong part in Christian and Byzantine liturgies. So that sort of roots it in a religious setting. And it's something that everybody is meant to sing, especially after the Protestant Reformation, when, communal singing became a thing. It then also becomes an issue for the civil rights era and what we're seeing right now as it keeps being used in political situations As well as just for fun, in my written statement, I included a link to a video of the US Navy in Jacksonville, Florida, with a multiracial group of people dressed in uniform performing Lift Every Voice and Sing. So please let me know if I can clarify that more, but this idea of belonging for lots of people, calling it a hymn really just hits it right on the nose, and I feel gets it right.
Thank you. Dr. Reese, can you please describe the significance of Lift Every Voice and Sing as it relates to the history of this country?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think the significance rests in really how it captures the story of this nation, the struggles that we have endured as a nation, the struggles that African Americans had endured. And part of that history is a way of remembering for the country, a way of remembering where we've been, and a continual reminder that history is a part of us, but also the sense of possibility in being able to move beyond that history. When the enslaved were free, when they were moved into the 20th century and pursued elements in pursuit of self-determination, equality for all. So it really is a message to African Americans, but is a message to all of us. And I think that's why it's embraced across the world. It is poetic, it is musical, and it is something that we can all embody and remember.
Thank you. Mr. Washington, how has the city of Jacksonville continued to honor the legacy of Lift Every Voice and Sing?
What we're currently doing, we're actually building a park, the Lift Every Voice and Sing Park. It's scheduled to be started in end of this month. And it shows that, fortunately for us, we found the exact birth site. It's going to build on the birth site and the place where the song Lift Every Voice and Sing was written. So we bring Jacksonville, we bring everybody to the place. And to get Jacksonville involved, we had some non-traditional non-traditional meeting. We had 350 people on site with a marching band of the Ed Wallace University, 150 member choir, and we all sung Lift Every Voice and Sing. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. You're recognized for as much time as you can get through with. You need to, Mike, you need to turn your mute off.
Sorry. I'll be very brief. I had a number of questions, but I'll just ask one that I'm just curious about. I used to be a religious liberty defense litigator, and I'm anticipating some resistance that because this is a hymn, and it which is what we all love about it, and it clearly includes religious language. Do any of you anticipate that some activist groups might oppose its use in rendition in public schools or venues? They will falsely claim, of course, that it's some sort of establishment of religion or it's offensive to someone. Have y'all thought that through? Maybe Mr. Clyburn or anybody. Maybe I'd direct it to my senior colleague.
Well, thank you very much. I'll respond to that this way. I was born and raised in the parsonage, and my church was a fundamentalist Christian church, Protestant. We were right across the street from St. Jude Catholic Church. I learned how to box from a Catholic priest. I'll never forget Father Haggerty, because what he taught me saved me a lot of pain growing up. So there is always going to be the differences of religious opinion when it comes to things like this. And so I dare not say that you will not get that kind of a reaction from some people. I do say, however, that the universality of this song cuts across race, gender, and religious grounds. And though the song will not be imposed upon anybody, it is just that when you want to recognize the unity that flows from the song, that you may put it on your programs to be sung. But what we would love to establish, and all the people with whom I've had this discussion, including my longtime friend, Leon Russell, this is all about having a national hymn as opposed to what could very well be divisive as a Black national anthem. We have one national anthem, and we are saying, let's have one national hymn as a gesture of bringing us together. You don't impose the singing of the national anthem on anybody at any school or any church. This is not an imposition.
That's well said. Anybody can opt out. I think you're exactly right.
Mr. Chairman, could I just add that the fourth verse of the Star Spangled Banner, our national anthem, is chock full of references to God, to "In God We Trust." So
that's exactly right.
On that grounds is already done.
But they don't let anybody sing the fourth passage. And that's right. That's why. But look, I'll just say, I mean, I could defend it in court if it was ever challenged, and I would suggest to those who will that you would reference the Supreme Court in 1952, Zorak v. Clausen. It said, "We are a religious people whose institutions presuppose a supreme being," and you would suggest that this is something that recognizes our deep heritage and tradition in this country, and it's not an imposition of religion on anybody. So I offer that for the good of the order. I yield back for the interest of time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And we're
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
My best advice is now to one more question, then we should go to the floor. And I think we'll have time for one more answer.
Thank you. Mr. Raskin, you're recognized, and then we put on our track shoes. Mr. Raskin, are you with us? He's already got his track shoes on, I guess.
Yeah, it looks like he's already gone to the
Ms.
floor.
Ross, you're going to take over for Mr. Raskin. And Ms. Ross is taking off as well, I think.
Yeah, well, let's just move to the floor.
All right, Hank, we're gonna an hour. We'll be in recess for an hour until 11:13 Eastern time. Thank you, everybody. and recess over. No more milk and cookies. Next, I guess in our hearing, I guess the last witness was going to be Mr. Raskin. Is he back with us yet? Jamie? Jamie's not with us. Miss Ross, are you with us? All right, team, this is not good. Hank Johnson, you're not there. Miss Garcia, you're there, aren't you? Sylvia? Well, she was. Her chair's there. It's empty. Miss Bush? Miss Jackson Lee? Well, we'll continue the colloquy between me and Mr. Russell on ancient Tennessee political history. There's Congressman Johnson making his way back.
Mr. Chair, I think Burgess Owens, Mr. Owens is would have some questions if that's in order. I don't know how you want to go with the timing.
You're doing a great job, Mr. Johnson. You were right about the 4 votes, and you're right about Mr. Owens. So the chair will now recognize Mr. Burgess Owens for 5 minutes.
Right.
Mr. Owens? You're recognized for 5 minutes, Mr. Owens. Somebody unmute Mr. Owens. Mr. Johnson, can you unmute Mr. Owens?
I wish. I'm at the airport.
Oh. Mr. Owens, are you with us? Mr. Johnson, I think you're still muted.
Hold a second. Okay, how's that?
There we go.
That's good.
Right.
You're
Sorry,
recognized for
guys.
5
Sorry
minutes
about
now,
that.
Mr. Johnson. Blow, hurricane, blow.
Am I okay now to speak real quickly?
You're on 5 minutes to question our witnesses or speak, or it's
Okay.
your 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Congressman Cohen. I won't take but a few minutes. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to all the witnesses for your comments. I've enjoyed it. I grew up in the Deep South, and I can say to Mr. Henderson, he's so correct. This country is all about becoming a more perfect union. And I'm just excited about the fact that I can kind of reflect real quickly. I grew up in Tallahassee on the shadows of Florida A&M campus. At 12 years old, I was demonstrating in front of the Florida State Theater with a group of college people that really believe in our nation. They believe in non-violent demonstration, and the efforts really showed out to be a really good calling for us. With that being said, I remember also in high school in those days where this song was actually the marching for graduating seniors. There was marching song hymn for that. And I want to say to fast forward, to go from there to where we are today, we have this remarkable panel of success, of diversity, of all races, creeds, and colors. We do need to have something that's going to bring us together. And I tell you, and I won't take too long on this, but the last stanza of the song says it all to me. Least our hearts drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shallow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our native land, true to our native land. That speaks it all to not only what's happening today, but what happened to that great generation that came before us, that believed in our nation, that succeeded. And just think about the author of this song. He is faithful. He's about the family, about free market, about education, and that was that great generation that gave us this stanza of this song that we can kind of come together with and bring our country back together. This has to be something, again. It's a hymn. It's not to take the place of our national anthem. I love that part of it too. We can agree on it, that this represents all Americans. The strength, the fight, the overcoming, the coming together is what this hymn really stands for. So I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to just speak real quickly. I'm thankful to have seen the growth we've had and where we've come from and where we are today. So with that being said, I don't have very many any questions. Just want to thank you for your presence, and Congressman Cohen, thank you for leading this, and of course, Congressman Johnson, thanks for leading this process for sure. And I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Appreciate your remarks and your brevity. Ms. Ross, you're recognized for 5 minutes or as much time as you need to take, less than 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Cohen. And I don't see Whip Clyburn, but thanks to him for his initiative here. I am from North Carolina and love participating in religious services, NAACP events, and all sorts of events where we sing, lift every voice and sing. And I will just say that the way that it sets the tone for whatever occasion we're participating in, it brings people together. And it's an honor to be here and learn even more about the history of this hymn, and to recognize and say out loud that Black Americans have experienced trauma, abuse, and inequity because of slavery, segregation, and racism. But always have found a way to rise up. And we need to celebrate that. And we need to do that across party lines, across race, and across areas of the country. I want to just ask a few questions of some of our distinguished panel members. Dr. Andre, to you first. I really love how you talked about what a hymn is and what it has meant in every culture. And so why is it important for our country, in particular, the United States, to have a hymn and even more than one hymn that are representative of our diversity and our people?
Thank you for your question. And I'm glad that the background of what a hymn is it just felt like it would be a really relevant conversation here. Because the hymn has all of, it goes back far, and it has religious and non-religious, and even in the Oxford English Dictionary talking about sort of praise for one's country, it feels like this is an important way to come together. When you designate, we have a wide repertoire of songs that a lot of Americans know, and songs that people, that vary with different times, but this one has shown a staying power, and to elevate it to the space of a national hymn allows us to feel that we can come together. And it's something where you don't need an instrument, you sing your song. It helps people have more access to the words to get to know the song if it has this standing, and just bringing every voice together. And, the words seem to connect to experiences of being here in the US, of having its association with African Americans, with being human and having good times as well as having a tough history. Having a hymn is something that everybody can do, and you don't need elaborate things. And if it's brought to that position, it says that we have a lot of songs that are important to many people, but here is a song that has a particular importance, and our singing it. It's a song that is, the national anthem is a terrific work, but it's in the 18th century. Here's a song right on the dawn of the 19th, 20th century, and it feels a little more connected. We have relatives with Melanie Edwards, who is here, who spoke so beautifully about her connection to these really august folks. It's nice to be able to have that connection when so many African Americans don't know sort of what their background is. So it brings, in a beautiful way, the not too distant past right up to the present, and we can sing it together. So I think there's a collectivity you have. You can stand in silence, but there's even more when voices come together.
Great. And Dr. Reese, how important would it be to have Lift Every Voice and Sing be our national hymn to your work at the African American National Museum of African American History and Culture? What would that mean?
Well, I can't, it's hard to predict the meaning, but I would frame a response about what the hymn represents in the terms of the power of music. It crossed my mind that music, American music, is one of the most visible examples that we have of America's pluralistic society. And Lift Every Voice and Sing encapsulates that. And I would find few people to argue about the power that music has as something that's universal to all human beings, to bind people together in the spirit of creating music, singing songs, and just representing and binding people together and serving as a beacon, as guidance and moving forward. So when you think about the historical and cultural significance, just think about that alone. The meaning, I believe, speaks for itself.
Thank you very much. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Ross. Next, I'll recognize Representative Fishbach. Are you still with us? Representative Fishbach is not with us. Is Representative Jackson Lee with us? There she is. Representative Jackson Lee from Houston, Texas. And as I always say, where they not only sing, but they dance.
Thank you. It has a great history in Houston, Texas. Obviously, we're right now studying an emancipation trail that starts from the announcement of the freed slaves by General Granger. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this hearing. And let me cite you. All should know that Chairman Cohen has been at the forefront of the voting rights trial and tribulation and advocacy, and out of his committee and its fine work came HR 40, the Commission to Study Slavery and Develop Reparations. And now this couldn't be more appropriate. The leadership, under the leadership of James Clyburn, his legislation for it to come under Chairman Cohen's committee. I'm glad to be a member of it, as he knows, and I just want to thank him very much. Let me quickly submit to the record, it may have already been the Lift Every Voice and Sing lyrics. I'd like to submit it to the record, ask unanimous consent. And then
without objection.
Thank you. And I'd like to read these four lines. I think it's 4 lines. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. What a patriotic group of words. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. I only have a short time, and so witnesses, I'm going to go very quickly on this question. And all you need to do is say yes or no. Is this an attempt to replace the Star Spangled Banner, the national anthem? Chairman Russell, yes or no?
No.
Professor Reese, Director Reese. Professor Reese.
I don't see it in that way, no.
Shana Redmond. Naomi Andre.
No.
Lloyd Washington.
No.
Melanie Edwards.
No.
Mr. Henderson.
No.
Thank you. I think that's an important affirmation of what and how important this message would be. We have a Star Spangled Banner. We honor it. Now we have the opportunity to ensure that we have a hymn. And hymn by its very nature, I'm not a musician, but I've had them in my family, is a healing and gathering piece. So Chair Russell, my time is short. I am a witness to the singing of the wonderful Lift Every Voice at the NAACP for all the decades I've gone as a life member. Can you just say again how powerful the beginning of your conference and what you see happening in the people's faces when you sing Lift Every Voice?
Well, I think, Congressman Jackson Lee, that whenever we convene, wherever we are, it sets the tone for the kind of meeting that we're going to hold. And as you well know, we never have a meeting that we don't begin or end with Lift Every Voice and Sing. I wanted to bring up just one thought across the board here. And that is, this song has a majesty. It has a majesty that lifts it, I think, above many other songs. I've heard it sung
Thank
by
you.
the Cookman College Choir and so many others. But I heard it sung for the first time by the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square in Salt Lake City.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thousands of voice. And it
Thank
was
you.
beautiful.
Let me ask Associate Director Reese and Professor Andre if I can get the answer to all of the witnesses. Hymns I view as healing. And I think the question that we need to present to America is the fact that no matter who you are, you would find a comfort of standing, sitting, or hearing this song. Because a hymn, we're voting on not the Black hymn, we're voting on the national hymn. And I think we have to make it very clear, would, no matter who we are, feel a healing sense or a unifying sense in this time. And so if you all would go to answering that so that I get that on the record, what makes it more potent that this would be an appropriate national hymn. I'll start with Reese, please. With the chairman's indulgence, I'd appreciate if you all would go quickly in your answers.
Sure, Congresswoman Lee, I believe that is the sole purpose of the hymn, and Lift Every Voice and Sing functions in that way in religious settings and outside religious settings.
Thank you. Redmond, I'm sorry I'm calling you by your last name if you're there.
That's fine. Thank you. My apologies. I lost sound and had to log back on. There's already precedence for this song being taken up in communities, various communities in the United States, various faith traditions from Jewish to various Christian, Protestant, as well as Catholic denominations, but also being translated internationally, right? Having been used in Angola and being translated into Obumbundu, having been requested for use in Japan and being published in Japan in 1936. So there's already precedence for the song being used across cultures, across national boundaries even.
Thank you, Professor Andre, then Washington.
Lift Every Voice and Sing is a national hymn for all of American peoples, absolutely. And it's being used this way, and it's wonderful to give it this recognition.
Professor President Washington?
I agree with it. And it's a song that speaks to all people, not just one.
Melanie Edwards?
The song reflects the men who wrote it. They were African Americans in America, but they saw themselves as citizens of the country. And so the lyrics invite others to face reality, but move forward and be hopeful.
We thank you for your family's legacy, by the way, and we thank you for being here. And we believe this is a tribute for the rainbow of Americans. And isn't it wonderful if we sung it and not divisively, but in a unifying manner? I want to thank all the witnesses that are here. And Mr. Henderson, thank you so very much for your service to this nation and your civil rights legacy. And thank all of those who've now made an excellent record that no matter who you are in America, you can stand and sing this song and feel comforted and feel approved and affirmed and not divided. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for allowing the extra for these witnesses to place that on the record, and I yield back. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson Lee. Now I'd like to recognize Mr. Jamie Raskin for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And I'm sorry it's been such a choppy day with all the voting, and it was especially tough for me because I was carrying proxies for, I think, 8 or 9 colleagues. So forgive me for being late, everybody. I was able to check out some of the earlier testimony. I want to thank the witnesses for their excellent testimony. I wonder if anyone would be prepared to address the question of where Lift Every Voice and Sings fits into American music generally, and how it would serve to enrich our musical lexicon if we were to formally embrace it and adopt it in this way. And I don't know, perhaps Ms. Andre, or could you address that?
Sure, I'll jump in. Thank you for that. And I'll jump in very quickly and others can add their voices. In American music history, we have hymns, we have protest songs, we have songs of praise, and they overlap with different categories. The fact that we have this song, which started very connected with the Black community, and then within its first 50 years, it became very associated with other different American, and as Professor Redmond has shown us, even outside of America. This is a song that has already risen in music historiography as having a particularly important place. Our recognition of it as a national hymn, I really feel, is almost giving it a title that it has already fulfilled.
Well, very nice. And Professor Redmond, could I come to you?
Yes, I would agree with especially that last sentiment. I think sonically, the song actually fits very, very comfortably inside of many of the singing traditions that we already have established through our kind of civic duties as citizens. But it is one that has a kind of melodic line that is in some respects more accessible than something like the Star Spangled Banner, right? That there are levels of difficulty to all of these songs, but that Lift Every Voice and Sing, especially because it was written for children, right, is already keeping in mind the kinds of capacities of its singers. And so it is accessible to people in that way, even if the language is sometimes a little bit different, right? We're inheriting the kinds of linguistic traditions of the late 19th century in all of these songs. So there is some learning curve, but it fits sonically very beautifully inside of what our national songs are already accomplishing.
Yeah, I know a song about the late Chilean singer Victor Jara, which goes, you can kill a singer, but you can't kill a song. And I wonder what this song represents to you, Professor Redmond. Let me just stick with you for a sec. You know, and I know everybody projects different meanings and different interpretations onto all forms of art and all forms of music. So it doesn't have one single meaning, but you've studied it so deeply and understand it in a very rich way. What would you say the thematic resonance is of the song for you?
I think one of the most significant through lines in the song are twofold. One is a we-ness, that there is something about collectivity that is urgent and necessary for our best successes moving forward, that there's always a we in mind. That stems both from its four-part composition from J. Rosamond Johnson all the way through the lyrics of the song, that it is always meant to be sung together. And then secondly, I think the messaging of the song really is about perseverance and transcendence, right? That there is a struggle that is in front of us, but it is worthy of taking up, and that will be fruitful, it will be successful in the final result.
Well, I love that. And you know, the point of the we-ness of it, the universality of it, of course, comes through in the very first line, lift every voice and sing. I remember as a kid, the first time I sang it, and a lot of kids don't want to sing. And I remember very clearly the teacher saying, this song tells you we need every person's voice. We need everybody singing. It's not just for the kids who love to sing. It's for everybody, even if you're a little shy about singing, you know, and that's beautiful. And of course, the theme of perseverance, which has been so much the hallmark of the African-American struggle in America, is something that speaks also universally to everybody, because everybody has been experiencing struggle. So I'm thrilled about this legislation. Mr. Clyburn, I thank you so much for bringing this forward. It's beautiful legislation that I hope will be unifying across every kind of line in America. And I thank all these witnesses for this great testimony. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Raskin. I think Representative Johnson had a question or two. And since he's at the airport with a plane about to leave, I'm going to recognize him ahead of Ms. Fishbach.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. Your indulgence. I'll be brief, but is Mr. Henderson still available? I'm on my phone, so I can't see all the screens. Let me just ask Mr. Henderson, it's sort of an open-ended question, but everyone has been very articulate this morning about what I would view the greatness of America. We are an exceptional nation, but we all acknowledge, of course, that we're still in this sometimes difficult, long process of becoming a more perfect union. So I give you an open mic and open platform to just share with us your view, I would love to hear on what are some of the most important things that we can and should be doing right now in that regard, making a more perfect union.
Well, for me, it ties into the words of Dr. King that we should continue to live together as brothers, lest we perish together as fools. Well, we need as much unification as possible at this particular point in time in the history of America because of all the various things that are happening. First, a communication system that is ongoing, continual 24/7. So as long as we understand that this song actually stands for what it says, and its place in history cannot be taken, and we need to use it as a message for unifying and not to be divisive.
That's a good answer. What I think everyone in the hearing today has acknowledged the importance of keeping the national anthem and making a national hymn and not confusing the two. And I just wonder if, and maybe this is a rhetorical question, but is there some risk that this effort will create confusion? In other words, that, the average constituent, average everyday American will see Congress pass something like this and they'll confuse it because there has been a lot of, maybe it's misleading headlines over the last year or so about things like this. And so is there a risk that we stir up controversy with everyone's good faith effort here to do something noble, that somehow we create more confusion or division by this misunderstanding that this is a competing national anthem? Does that make sense? What would you say about that, Mr. Henderson?
In all things, with freedom of speech, we have risk and we have reward. And we need to be able to explain to whomsoever that might be adverse to lift every voice and sing what it really means. That's one of the challenges we have in this country right now is that far too many people in this country do not know the history of this country. Therefore, they speak on opinion rather than fact. And so I'm so grateful that we've had a number of people on here giving the history of it so that we understand that it is a unifying hymn and not a divisive hymn. Even if you do hear someone that thinks that it should not be, then to be able to explain to them what it really means.
I think that's well said. Look, one thing I'm sure we all agree on is that we have a problem in this country with cultural illiteracy, civic illiteracy, right? And it transcends every socioeconomic line and every state and every place. And so, maybe something like this can help in that regard to help educate all of us, all Americans again. So with that regard, I think it could be a noble pursuit. So I appreciate all the witnesses again for the time. Sorry for the confusion. As Mr. Raskin said, it's been a crazy day on the Hill. And I'm sorry for the background noise at the airport. Now yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I now recognize Ms. Garcia. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would thank the sponsor of this proposal. I think it's very important that we move forward. Coming from Houston and coming from Texas, I've grown with this hymn, and I've grown with Juneteenth celebrations. I've grown with a lot of rich cultural history that adds to the diversity of our great city. And I think this is a fitting way to kickstart, if you will, National Black History Month. Today's hearing reaffirms the unwavering commitment of this committee and this Congress to advancing equity, racial justice, and opportunity. Recognizing our African-American history of struggles and resilience is a step in the right direction towards a path of healing, reconciliation, reunion. And music does bring people together. I mean, I don't know of a church that doesn't at some point try to bring their congregation together with good music. So I think that it's important that we recognize this hymn. So my questions are for the historians in the group, and I wanted to begin with Ms. Reese. Ms. Reese, apparently, and I've learned today from reading all this, that a song is not a song and it's a song. There are hymns, there are anthems. Could you tell us the difference between a hymn and an anthem?
Thank you for that question. In fact, the term hymn and anthem, they are frequently, if not often, used interchangeably. Hymn is particularly designed in a religious setting, in a worship setting. Anthems, people rally around for a particular cause. I think what's also interesting to note that in society, we can adopt anything, any piece of music, and declare that it serves a purpose that may not be its original intent. So any piece could become an anthem. Maybe not necessarily any piece can be a hymn, but it's kind of coalesces around the idea of what that piece of music is supposed to symbolize.
Thank you for that. And Ms. Andre, you've studied this area also. Has there been any other hymns that have been made national hymns, or there's ever been a thought before to make a hymn a national hymn?
I actually don't know that history in terms of the United States or other countries with recognizing national hymns, but I would like to support what my colleague Dwandalyn Reese has mentioned about hymns and anthems are the meaning we give them. My history before, where we're going back to antiquity and up through the liturgy, is that hymns particularly have a very malleable and flexible meaning. So they can symbolize devotion and God, and country is one. So I'm sorry, I don't know the other national hymns. And I think you don't really hear about them. But going back to an earlier question, would this be confusing for the American public? I think we all have our national anthem and we love the national anthem, even if it is a little hard to sing. I think we have the complexity and the sophistication to realize that you can have more than one important national music, national song. And this not being the anthem, but being elevated as a hymn adds the sense of belonging, since so many, I can't think of any other song besides the national anthem that people know so well. So in terms of we're setting a really wonderful precedent to have music speak in this way.
I'll then defer to Ms. Reese. Do you happen to know the answer to my question?
Actually, I have learned, and I can't speak to specifics, but there have been several instances where hymns have been put forward in this country as designated national hymns. I don't believe they have passed, but within the last day or two, I was informed of that very fact. And I would invite.
It's as many of y'all have already testified. This is not meant to supplant or replace. It is a hymn, not an anthem. And as Mr. Henderson said, we cannot let this be a symbolic gesture that divides. It's about division, because as Mr. Clyburn has said from the beginning, I mean, if you hear the song, and I've heard it so many times in song and many occasions in Houston, at a swearing in of a mayor, at funerals, I graduated from TSU, a historically Black college, from their law school, at the graduation. I mean, it is part of the culture. It's part of, and not just really, frankly, the African American culture, but it's part of Houston's culture because it reflects the diversity of our city. So I'm really excited about this. And I wanted to just say thank you to Ms. Edwards for being here and sharing your story, because obviously what you have inherited and the legacy that you carry is so important to not only your community, but to the entire country. So thank you for being here, and thank you to all the witnesses. And Mr. Chairman, I see my time has expired, so I'll have to yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. I appreciate it. Ms. Fishbach, you've been waiting, and I think you're still with us, I hope. No, Ms. Fishbach. I guess she must have needed to go to catch an airplane or something. Well, with that, I want to thank all of our witnesses for their testimony and their time. It was educational, and thank Mr. Clyburn, who's back. He was subbing for Mr. Hoyer and doing the colloquy with Mr. Scalise. In your absence, Ms. Ross questioned and testified how she appreciated you bringing this bill for us, and so did Ms. Garcia and Mr. Raskin. We appreciate it. It's been a very enlightening and inspiring committee. I'm proud to chair it, and thank you for bringing it. And with that, this will conclude today's hearing, unless Mr. Clyburn has anything to close with.
I just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks all of our witnesses here today for their very enlightened discussion here. And I assure all of you, as I said in my opening remarks, I get a little bit uncomfortable. I grew up in a little town of Sumter, South Carolina. Mary McLeod Bethune was from Maysville. I remember on one occasion her expressing a little bit of discomfort with the reference to Lift Every Voice and Sing being the quote unquote Negro national anthem. We are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We should have one national anthem for all. And I think it will elevate the human spirit. It will help bring us together. And God knows we need to come together by naming, making Lift Every Voice and Sing such an iconic song, our national hymn. That will bring us together in a very significant way. And I'm hopeful that the committee, subcommittee and full committee will see their way clear to report this out. And I think the votes are in the House to pass it.
Could I
Thank you,
leave with
Mr.
this?
Clyburn.
Could
Yes,
I
ma'am.
leave
Ms.
with this
Edwards?
comment quickly? I think you have a wonderful opportunity to remind people that the composers saw it as a hymn, not as an anthem.
Absolutely.
And to beat that little drum in public that we never separated ourselves from the country.
Absolutely.
It was
Thank you so
written
much
as a
for that.
hymn.
Absolutely.
So use that as a teaching point. I'm an old teacher. Use that as a teaching point, a learning moment.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards, and thank you, Mr. Whip, and thank you all the witnesses and the members of the committee who participated today. So that will conclude our hearing. Without objection, our witnesses, you might have somebody submit questions in writing, which people can do up to 5. I think we have 5 days to submit questions, and there may be questions that are sent to you for requests that you answer them. 5 legislative days for members to submit written questions. With that, the hearing is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr.